Welcome to the Common Good Data Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Roger Suclupe.
And I'm Drew Reynolds. Roger, so thrilled that you can be on, especially for the intro segment for today.
I know it's been a minute. I hope you're doing well, brother.
Hey, doing great. Well, folks, we're going to get right into it. Today, we're going to talk about the challenge that nonprofit and social sector leaders are having in trying to translate data and information into meaningful storytelling that drives the important fundraising work that sustains their organizations. And I think for many of you who might have had challenges with this, I know this has been something that has taken me a lot of practice and a lot of fails along the way in trying to figure it out. We wanted to bring on an expert who has some great experience in how to do this, and that is Candice Jordan, who's the Chief Development Officer for Atlanta Habitat for Humanity. And in the role, she leads strategic communications, stakeholder engagement, resource development, and a couple of restore operations to generate revenue for Atlanta Habitat. She's got an amazing perspective, I think, to share, and I'm very excited to dive into this interview.
Yeah, it was really neat to hear really just about like the importance of historical context and why it's really key for folks to know the whys and the hows of an organization and not just make assumptions because there's so much that goes into the community support that organizations like Atlanta Habitat for Humanity offer for community members.
Yeah, and it's just kind of trying to the term used backwards design or kind of reverse engineering, trying to figure out what it is that your stakeholders are looking for in providing funding opportunities, and then trying to find ways to make your data and your stories to try to kind of match
Mhm.
that, to kind of build that fit, which I think was really,
Yeah.
really powerful. Well,
Yeah.
also, I do want to share with our audience that if you're kind of looking for some practical tools to kind of accompany some of the thinking that we're doing in this episode, I encourage you to check out one of our online courses. It's called the Break the Starvation Cycle, which you can find at commongooddata.com/courses. In that course, it kind of goes through the clarity impact funding framework. And that last piece, really focusing on that. How do you take that impact information that you have and turn it into to drive really positive storytelling at your organization? So it's free. Check it out. You can enroll today, and it's self-paced, very simple, and it's also short and designed for social sector leaders who are very busy people. You can just watch the videos when you're working out or on a run or on your commute, and quickly make your way through the course. A second resource I'll also share is the Behavioral Health Clarity Impact Funding and Resilience Scorecard, which I just released.
Mm.
Very excited about that. So for those of
Nice.
you who do work in mental health, substance use prevention, behavioral health broadly speaking, I encourage you to check out the scorecard because it walks through the SIF framework, but really encourages you to think about how to go through the whole process of
Mhm.
using that clarity that you need in the work that you have, driving impact in your organization, and turning that into meaningful funding in the context of federal and state grants. So check it out, the Behavioral Health Clarity Impact Funding and Resilience Scorecard at commongooddata.scoreapp.com. Again, that's commongooddata.scoreapp.com. So there's a couple of resources for us. Roger, any final words that we can share with our audience before we dive into the interview?
You know what, y'all? This is not only a great interview that we just had, but it also provided me an opportunity, again, like I said earlier, just to learn more historical context. I just can't emphasize that, to folks who are listening, that if you're interested in what an organization is doing, if you're interested in their whys, reach out to them, check them out, and go beyond just checking them out on the website. Like contact somebody, learn from them, and more importantly, if it's something that resonates with you and you share a passion with that particular organization, then connect with them. It could be fundraising, it could be something very different.
Yeah, 100%. So I love it. Well, we're going to dive right into this interview. And so we'll go ahead and turn it over to start listening to our fantastic episode with Candice Jordan. Candice Jordan, welcome to the Common Good Data Podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Well, we are so excited to have this conversation around your work, around housing, and around the work at Habitat for Humanity. So, to begin, many nonprofits talk and collect data, but struggle to actually use it strategically in fundraising work and communications and storytelling. In your experience at Atlanta Habitat, what are some of the biggest challenges or maybe mistakes that organizations make when trying to use data to tell their story? What have you seen?
Yeah, I see it a lot in our work in organizations that I've worked for in the past, and particularly when you're thinking about crafting a proposal for a funder or foundation to consider. Nonprofits have a tendency to pull any data point that is in relatively close proximity to the work that they're doing, instead of thinking about, well, really, what is our special niche? What is our special sauce, and what problems are we really trying to solve, and what is a compelling way to share how we're solving it and using data for that purpose. And so it's kind of a backwards engineered way to think about, how do I make myself more valuable to the funder that I'm trying to partner with and trying to get investment from. And so it takes some kind of stepping back and reflection. And it's a science to really learn that muscle on how you say, all right, well, this is how I can use data instead of data guiding what I do.
Wow, I love it. This is how we can use data instead of having data guiding what we do. And I think oftentimes that is something that pulls organizations is what you just said, right? Another thing I liked is their special sauce, right? So when I think of like Chick-fil-A has an incredible, they cornered the market with their Chick-fil-A sauce,
Yeah.
right? My son is always asking for extra Chick-fil-A sauce. So what is that sauce that gets, that would get an organization going, right? How does an organization utilize that special sauce in order to tell their story, right? And Candice, you often talk about the art and science of nonprofit strategy, right? So how can organizations, based on your experience and the things that have seen through your different work, how can organizations combine data and storytelling in a way that strengthens their strategy rather than treating them as separate activities?
Yeah, I think there's often a confusion between outputs and outcomes. And I think that's part of the challenge that organizations face. One of the things that I think is the easiest way to really understand what your outcome is, the work that you are doing well, that your secret sauce is through the voices of the very people that you're benefiting. We use this process a lot in our organization, talking to the homeowners that we have impacted. And as we tell them to share their story, we learn that not only did we provide them an opportunity for financial stability, but we also set the groundwork for them to start businesses or divert resources back into their household to support their kids going to college or furthering their own education. And so understanding that, even though that might not been, as the organization was founded, an expectation of an outcome, it is an outcome. And so what data is supporting how unique this opportunity is. A large portion of our homeowners happen to be female head of households. How many female head of households or women in general are starting businesses, and comparing that against the data that we are able to generate in the homeowners that we support? To me, that's how I use data. I guide it with the voices and the experiences of those we're benefiting, use their storytelling to really pull out the data points that help amplify the impact we're making.
So it's several layers involved, right? It's just not about housing or providing housing stability for an individual. It's everything that you just mentioned, right? So how has that opportunity to gain housing impacted other opportunities that grow out of this? And I love what you have on the website, building people, growing communities, right? It says we work to build in Atlanta where all people have access to quality, affordable home ownership in safe, vibrant neighborhoods with opportunities to thrive. And what is thriving, right? So I
Yeah.
appreciate you sharing that and how you utilize the data points in order to create a narrative. And what does this narrative look like?
Yeah, no, it's really important. And Thrive is such an important part of our work. I mean, it's a word we use all the time and we really mean it. Most people think that there are two myths associated with our organization, how we were founded. The former President Carter and his wife Rosalind were huge humanitarians, but a lot of people believe they were founders of the organization. They weren't. They just helped put this mission on the map. But people also believe that we give houses away, and we do not. Our homeowners purchase the home through us. Atlanta Habitat serves as the bank, and we provide a mortgage for our homeowners to buy the house. And so to be able to use their stories and really talk about, so we, as the mortgage provider, we anticipate being in their life for 20 to 30 years.
Mhm.
So the opportunity to say, well, that day one, the day that you get the keys to your home, is just the foundation. It's the start of our relationship. How can we continue to invest in you to make sure that you do thrive beyond this home ownership opportunity? And so it's something that we take to heart.
I think it's important. Thanks for sharing the history context, right? So there's a lot of misconception that occurs, especially in nonprofit world, right? I think a lot of folks sometimes read what's on the surface instead of taking a deeper dive into finding out like the roots of something. And
Yeah.
so when misconception occurs in community, again, that's when you have folks thinking, the wrong thing or like this is what they do. And it's not really it. Like I just encourage folks to really take a deeper dive and find out what the historical context of an organization, an agency is, especially if there are data points that create that story, that create that historical context of where we started and where we are now.
Yeah, I so agree. And I think that is the power of storytelling, right? And so the more that we can present images and language and data to really help folks understand the work that we're trying to do and why we're doing, is the opportunity. You got to tell people things at least 7 times, right, before it actually sticks. And so the more visual messaging, language, and things that we can use to help folks understand what we want them to understand is really, really important.
So I want to follow up, Candice, on something you mentioned earlier in our conversation about kind of, I think you used the term like reverse engineering or backwards designing out kind of how you work with your programmatic data to match a sort of interest or need or desire on the funder side.
Yeah.
And I think this can be really challenging for folks in the social sector who maybe have more experience in the programmatic aspects of their work. They're really good at serving, but they might not necessarily know how to then translate that into something that a donor can understand. And
Mhm.
I'm curious, what have you found to be helpful? Like, how can nonprofit leaders who have more of a programmatic lens
Mhm.
learn or develop the skill set or gather more information about their funders and a supporter in a way that helps them to craft that narrative?
Yeah. Every funder is different. Every funder has a different thing that really drives them and sparks interest, right? And so, unfortunately, it requires more time, which I know not a lot of nonprofit leaders do not have more of. But the intention behind really connecting with the funder or whoever it is that you're trying to bring into the mission, to really understand and have conversation and ask questions. Um, I always challenge the team. I think the prospect research piece of our work is the most critical, um, because it helps shorten the work that you have to do to try to guess and anticipate what that funder wants to understand about the work you're doing. And so it does require taking some time and having a meeting and bringing them into the work and seeing it firsthand. And usually it's really helpful in that anytime we bring a donor into our office where they can see our program, our work firsthand, a lot of those questions surface in that conversation. And so that is absolutely a hint into the things that they're most intrigued by, that they're most interested in. And so as you think about those questions, it helps understand, well, what data do I need to create or pull in order for this to resonate with this funder given what they're interested in. So I think it takes conversation. It takes the intention behind doing the research and bringing them into the fold to say, this is the work we're doing. This is why we do it. This is what has sparked this opportunity with this organization. And this is why we think that you're interested in, and let them respond to that.
Hmm. Data is not only crucial for the livelihood of an organization, but is also a way to connect with funders, right? Or to connect with individuals who have an interest in what it is, the whys of an organization. Like, why are we doing this? Like, why is this a societal thing that we want to help make better, right? And so, when utilizing data, and, again, there's different components to this, fundraising, writing grants, making sure that, you create a story that gets to the heart of what you're doing. When using data more intentionally in proposals and donor communications at Atlanta Habitat, what kinds of results have you seen in terms of funding success or developing stronger relationships with donors, especially when it comes to helping donors understand, instead of seeing data as numbers, right? As numbers, seeing data as a pathway, like a story.
Yeah. It's just that I think it's personifying that data, which is really, really important. I was able to do a presentation yesterday for International Women's Day. And one of the data points that I shared in that room was that 80% of what I shared earlier is 80% of our homeowners are female head of households. In a lot of those cases, is first-time home owners who at 65 years old never had a chance to own a home and decided they wanted to. They're now empty nesters. But I said that data point is really, really compelling by itself. I said, but let me tell you the story behind that data. Who I see in that is Ebony, a homeowner who was able to come to us and was first denied, but came back after she reduced her debt to income ratio. And since she's purchased her home, has not started one business, but two businesses. I see another homeowner, Billy, who purchased her home and saw a neighborhood need to provide a safe space for kids in her community to play, and so advocated in the nearby church to give her the access to this empty parking lot, and now has morphed into a safe community park in that community. I mean, that's what is behind the data that I think that nonprofits have to feel compelled to elevate. And I think the other part of that is, oftentimes I think we believe as nonprofits that in order to make our work more compelling, we have to use data that is challenging to really fathom and digest. We want to use stark data points that say this is a urgent need because we have this number of kids who are going without food on a daily basis. And I understand from a perspective that it's important to bring some urgency to the conversation. However, I do think part of our responsibility as nonprofits that are really, really close to the work is to identify opportunities to asset frame that data. That this isn't a community that is poor or impoverished, but this is a community that, because of limited access to key resources, they haven't been given the opportunity to excel in a way that we know they can, and we believe they can. And our resources, your resources, can help them succeed in a way that we all want for our communities.
Asset frame. I love that terminology that you just learned, that you just shared with us, because you're right. I feel like at times we can be very have like a deficit perspective
Yeah.
of things, and when we reframe, right, and share a story that from an asset frame perspective, it shifts the narrative
That's the
completely.
narrative. Yeah.
Yeah,
It shifts
awesome.
the responsibility, right? So it's a shared responsibility versus it being, I need your money because I think this issue is important. No, we all should care about this issue, and this is why.
I loved how you kind of framed the sort of, we a lot of times in social work, Roger and I, with social workers, use the term strength based, but that kind of asset based framing around the data and stories you tell. And I'm curious about, you mentioned before misconceptions around the work of Habitat, that people think we give away houses, for example, and you also shared examples that I think counter some narratives about individuals who might receive or work with Habitat to obtain a home, around being leaders in their community, being business owners. And I'm curious about kind of what your conversations have been like in
Mm.
communicating some of these different narratives that maybe are contrary to what you might see in commonplace narrative about certain neighborhoods or individuals or people.
Yeah. Usually it's a real positive reception. Usually it's a, oh, I didn't know that. We take in information naturally as human beings in bite-sized pieces, right? And that's why I get so excited about storytelling in general. I mean, I can walk into the room and that's storytelling. What I wear, how I wear my hair, the tone of my voice, jewelry I've decided to wear that day. Um, my energy, all of that is storytelling something about me. And we take in bite sized pieces of that information. And unfortunately, sometimes when it comes to organizations, and I've worked in nonprofit for a long time, almost 20 years. And so I understand that most nonprofits have a huge complexity to how they're organized and the work that they actually are doing. There's usually multiple buckets of priority. And it is really, really hard to share the complexity of that work in bite-sized doses and the way that people receive it. So it, so I love opportunities to speak with people live, to participate in events where we have an opportunity to really share in depth the work that we do, because usually the response is, I didn't know that. I didn't know you guys didn't give away homes. I didn't know you guys provide financial literacy. Didn't know you guys do preservation work all over the city. Wow. Because in our social media account, I can't tell all of those stories in one
Right.
lump sum, because then, people get exhausted with the content you're throwing at them. And so I think it's definitely a mixed approach in how you share that information in bite-sized doses, but also where there's opportunities to get in front of people and really go into depth of the complexity of the work. I think that's so important.
Yeah. Well, I think it's that being strategic. You talked about kind of the different channels you use and the different kind of bite-sized ways you can kind of enter people into the broader story of Habitat. And I think it's, we used the term art and science earlier as nonprofit leaders work on. And for our listeners to the show, like if you are feeling like you're still trying to build in this area, keep working at it, because there's opportunities to continue to develop that skill. And each time you try it, you get better and better at it. But speaking of our audience, our audience loves to have practical things that they can take away from these episodes. And so, can you share maybe a few practical ways that nonprofit leaders can start collecting and using data to strengthen their value proposition to foundations or corporations or individual donors?
Yeah. I definitely think that it is a mix of things, right? And I think the most compelling stories involve some level of data that describe a community or that can predict a future hopeful outcome of what support for a community will do. There's a strong narrative that really elevates the data or bridges together your messaging with the data that you're using to help tell that story. And I think the other piece is really visual. People have to see whether it is really descriptive in your narrative or it's photos or video, which we use a lot to really understand and have the complete picture in their mind. And so I think it's a mix of all of those pieces. When you're even in proposal writing, we are very unconventional sometimes, where we will share a video, we will share testimony, we will share a drone footage of a planned development that we're starting, because I know that that piece of it, and to actually see it, is very different than me writing about it and using data. So I think it's all three of those pieces, I think, have to be present in order for folks to really understand the work that you're trying to do and for your impact to better resonate with them.
Yeah, recently was at a conference, and one of the workshops that I attended, they were talking about how they utilize photo voice as a way to share a story, right? Whether it was, especially with data, the type of data that they were trying to get out to the community leaders and the community, it was really hard to to navigate for folks because it was overwhelming with numbers, and so they shifted and they told their data story through photos and how that was able to resonate in a different way than if they were just presenting charts and numbers and pie charts and all this other stuff. So
A photo says 1,000 words, right? Um, and then you also have to remember, you think back when you were a kid and you were in class, what was the most exciting day in class when your teacher was putting data and pie charts on a wall, or when you got a chance to watch a movie that really highlighted a lesson that you might have learned in that class.
hmm.
There are a number of ways that people learn and receive information. And I think
I
having variety is really, really important.
I absolutely agree. You took me back actually when I was in so being from North Carolina, where I've lived for a lot of years, one of the big things was in March. I don't think they do this anymore, but I do remember a teacher rolling in the TV cart and we would watch the basketball game.
I
So
remember that. I remember the TV part. Absolutely. So
I
basketball
ain't trying
game.
to say, yeah, I ain't trying to say, I'm not gonna name the teachers
There's
or
math.
where I went to school, but it
There's
was
math and
fun.
science and sports. I'm there.
Yeah. Speaking of movies, Roger, I feel like that's a good segue into our culture question.
Oh
We
yeah.
always love to do at the end of our episodes a way to reflect back on the conversation through the lens of 80s and 90s nostalgia.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
So,
So,
Roger, what do you got for us?
so funny enough, I don't know if you can see this on you see what it says? You see who that
Oh,
is?
the Golden Girls.
It
there it
says
is.
Squad
Squad
Goals.
goals. Love it.
So, I've received this, I was gifted this, from somebody, and, it's I used to watch the Golden Girls when I was a kid. No shame in that. No shame in that. But today's 80s and 90s, I was thinking about a few things. And Drew, I'm not sure when this will air, but yesterday, and I'm doing this because I know that Drew is a Notre Dame fan. And yesterday, yesterday, the iconic coach from Notre Dame football passed away, Lou Holtz. And so
Right. Yeah.
I was thinking of like, wow, like 80s and 90s, we had a lot of iconic sports figures, whether it was sports, whether it was a player, whether it was a team, right? And I was just thinking, like, wow, what iconic 80s or 90s or whenever, right? Do you remember like from your childhood or maybe just, maybe your teen years? And I mean, gosh, there's too many for me to choose from, but I'm gonna go with this and don't hate because I'm a Duke fan. I'm gonna go with the iconic 1991, 1992
Oh man.
Duke Blue Devil teams who won back-to-back national championships, the first team to have done that since UCLA. So, and the iconic players, Christian Laettner, Grant Hill, Bobby Hurley. I mean, the list can go on and on.
Christian
That's my
Laettner,
80s and
man.
90s reflection. Drew, Candice, I'm so excited to hear what y'all's are.
Oh man. Well, I'll start, so I'll give Candace some time to think because I always try to make our guests not have to be fully on the spot. So I mean, it's hard for me to go back from the like 1988, 89 Notre Dame football teams, and then really 1993 was when I was at the point where I kind of understood a little bit more about what was going on because I was a young child at that point. But it was the 1993 Notre Dame football team that was end of the game field kick from Boston College away from winning the national championship. And
Oh,
it's like the classic moment of like, oh, so close but didn't get it, and I'll always remember that. But yeah, Lou Holtz, incredible figure for sure.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So going with the sports theme, and you would pick a one subject that I'm not a huge fan. Okay. I married a sports person, and we have become a sports family. So I get tidbits here and there. But I would say what I would have to highlight is, and we share this with our kids all the time because, we get an opportunity I'm from Atlanta, grew up in Atlanta. Atlanta is home to me. It's still home to me. And so definitely a proud native. And we talk about our kids being able to go to Atlanta United games and Falcons games.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? Growing up, we never went to any of those games because the only thing that we could afford because it was free were Braves tickets. We
Yeah.
used to read enough books, you would get free tickets to the Atlanta Braves game. And so I grew up going to Atlanta Braves games and
Wow.
watching David Justice in the 90s.
Ooh,
David Justice, yeah.
Yes,
what a
for the
name
Atlanta
from the
Oh
Braves.
man,
past. Yeah.
So that is
Wow.
nostalgia for me when you
Greg
think about
Maddux
90s
and
sports. It definitely was the
John
Atlanta Braves.
Schmaltz, like the
John
old school,
Schmaltz, yeah, the
yeah,
pitchers, man, the amazing relief pitching that the Braves had in the 90s.
And there was a time during
absolutely.
that time when Deion Sanders played for both the Braves and
Yeah,
the
that's right.
Falcons.
He played for the
So
Braves and the Falcons. He was
yes,
a two-sport athlete.
yes. So I would
Oh, wow.
say nostalgia
Neon
grows.
Dion back in the day.
Yeah.
Oh,
Fun.
amazing. Well, we appreciate this trip down memory lane. Every time we got to do like some piece of it here, and I actually appreciate the history of Braves games because I moved to Atlanta as an adult, and so I've only known kind of the Braves and their more current. But I've always kind of watched from the outside because I grew up in Cincinnati, and so I was always watching the Braves beat the Cincinnati Reds as a
The
child.
Reds.
I always had like a little bit of like, oh, the Braves are again winning the National League. It was, so I've come to like, I'm trying to just take my childhood trauma on losses and put that away and open myself up to becoming a Braves fan.
You have to come on over. It is nostalgia. I mean, you still see the Atlanta Braves hat is still just a
Oh, yeah.
common thing here, and so it's definitely a lot of nostalgia. So
Awesome. Well,
Absolutely.
Candice, thank you so much for joining us today. If people want to find out more about Atlanta Habitat or the work that you do, how can they find that information?
go to our website, www.atlantahabitat.org.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
We appreciate you having you today.
Loving to have the conversation. Thank you so much.